In the name of God, peace be upon you all, and welcome to the second session of the last day of our seventh symposium that is studying and analyzing the experience of Islamic movements in governance and politics in Lebanon, Palestine, and Yemen. Yesterday and today, we have been speaking about Yemen, and today we are focusing on Al-Islah Party. This morning, we had the first session, and we had 4 papers. And now is the second session, and we will have 5 speakers. The first one will be Dr. Francois Burgoy. Dr. Francois, I will introduce him. He is going to speak about the peculiarity of the experience of the Yemeni Islah movement. He is an expert on Islamic movements, especially in Yemen, and he is an Arabist, political scientist, and he speaks Arabic, and he lived in the Arab countries, and he is also from the National Center for Scientific Research for several years now. Today he is an honorary member or fellow in that national center, and he lived in the Middle East for over 25 years, and he was in North Africa as well as in Africa or in Yemen, and he was also the head of the Institute of Archaeology and Sociology, and he also was this head of the Sanaa Center for Research and Studies between 1997 and 2003, and he worked in several academic French research centers, and he wrote a number of books, including the Islamic movement in North Africa, and another book under the title Face to Face with Islamic Political Islam, and another book which is Islam versus Al-Qaeda. And Francois also will talk about the peculiarity of the Yemeni experience. Afterwards, Dr. Shafiq Saleh is going to speak about the problem of democracy and the requirements of the change within the structure of Al-Islah. Dr. Saleh is head of the Universal Africa University, and he has a number of articles and participation in politics and culture. One of the most important books was the religious groups in Yemen and their impact on the social peace or civil peace. Then we have the issues of the young groups in Al-Islah movement and the lack of self-critique by Yusra Hamadi. Yusra Hamadi is the Secretary General of the Students' Union in Turkey formerly, and now she is preparing for her PhD in Yalova University in media, and she is a social activist. She's interested in media and students' activity, and she has a number of youth activities and seminars and other social activities. Afterwards, we have an intervention by Dr. Ahmed Al-Shalafi about the overlap between the partisan and da'wah aspects of Al-Islah. He is the editor of the Yemeni aspect in the Al Jazeera channel, and he was the correspondent of Al Jazeera in Yemen until 2017, and he is a member of the Yemeni writers and authors, and he is a member of the journalist syndicate, and he has a number of books and a book of poetry, political books, and cultural books. The last speaker in this session will be Mr. Ali Al-Ahmadi. He will speak about Al-Islah movement or Al-Islah party and the political environment between agreement and disagreement. Mr. Al-Ahmadi is the Assistant Secretary General of Al-Nahda for Peaceful Change Movement. Welcome all to this session. And because we have a large number of this session, and to give a space for the commentators, because in the morning session we didn't have time to listen to the commentators, I will try to be brief, and I will give each speaker 20 minutes only, and afterwards we will take the comments of commentator, and we will conclude with giving a few minutes for each speaker to comment on these comments of the comments. We will start with Dr. Francois Burgoy. Of course, he speaks Arabic, but he was requested to present in his paper in English, so he prepared it in English, and we're going to listen to him in English, and we will listen to the interpretation in Arabic. Those who want to listen to English, you can do that. You have to go to the English channel where right now we have a broadcasting in both languages. So you can listen directly to Dr. Francois or to the interpretation. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sami. I'm proud, and I want to thank you all for this confidence, which is giving me the right to speak among a panel of real specialists of Islah. I feel a little ashamed to express myself among people who are not only tourists in Yemen, but who are activists, citizens who have experienced much longer than I have. I was initially asked, I discovered this morning, and it was a bad wake up. I discovered that I was supposed to address the issue of gender in Tajammu' al-Islah al-Yemeni. And I immediately reacted because I have too much respect for the issue of ladies in politics, and to express myself on an issue where I have absolutely no experience, no background, except maybe that I am really proud to say that I have met several times the most famous lady member in Hizb al-Islah, who is Madame Tawakkul Karman. In fact, you know, we might know that my path as a researcher was that I did comparative studies. I had the opportunity as a researcher in National Center for Scientific Research to stay extensively, first of all, in Shimal Africa, in North Africa, in Algeria, Tunis, Morocco, Libya, then to move to Egypt for 5 years, then to move to Murtafa'at, Sana'a, to Yemen for 6 years, and then to Syria. And my path of analysis was to compare the background of the Islamist movement when they were appearing and their specific resources. And what I want to say today is to wrap up, to summarize very briefly what I discovered very different and very interesting in Yemen compared to, for instance, Algeria or even Egypt, which most of you know quite well. Now, if I was to wrap up in just one sentence, the reason why I was so interested by Islah from an analytical point of view, instead of expressing social science theory, I would allow one of my, I may say, my Yemeni friends, but also one of the leaders of Tajammu' al-Yemeni lil-Islah, who is Allah yarhamuhu, Muhammad Kahtan. I think it was you know that Muhammad Kahtan was arrested or maybe kidnapped, and during the last sequence of conflict in
هو فرانسوا هو لم يتوفى، هو تحت الاعتقال.
He is arrested. He is not dead yet, but he is arrested.
You have no proof. You have a proof of life. It's a good news for me because I've never heard such a good news. Let's say Muhammad Kahtan.
أنقل رسالة، لا أعرفه، أنقل رسالة فقط.
I'm just communicating a message. I don't know him personally.
We do not know yet, but it's a good news for me that you denied the fact that the news I had myself received was not good. Anyway, Muhammad Kahtan, and I hope that we shall soon use together the second commercial flight from Sana'a in the near future. Muhammad Kahtan in 2002 or 3 said to me, you know, Francois, in the entire Arab world, Ikhwan Muslimun, Muslim brothers, they tried more or less to impose Islam in the constitutions. At a time when we in Yemen, we did the opposite. We are those who imposed or tried and impose constitution inside Islam. And I think this was a kind of a revolutionary assessment for me. And I was, this is what I want to briefly develop or comment upon. Of course, the main specificity of Yemen, it has two different national histories: the South with the British colonialism and the North. But I don't want to be unrespectful to the people of the South. But I was always said that the North part of Yemen, in terms of demography, was more important than the South. And few people know that when the British moved into Aden in early 19th century, the population was not higher in this area than 4,000 people. So the history of North Yemen appears to be more important in terms of influence. And so the main characteristic of Yemen is that after the departure of the Ottomans, there was no colonial rule from the West. And this is so important. So the process by which the society evolved and began to interiorize new institutional techniques like a constitution, like elections, like political pluralism, did not occur under the pressure of an alien society. We may say that to a certain extent, this process went on inside, not inside the Yemeni society, because Yemen was confronted to direct foreign intrusion, like Egypt. Egypt did a lot, of course, but the process of evolving in Yemen came inside the, not the Islamic thought, but inside the Islamic culture, inside the Islamic cultural atmosphere, at a difference when in Algeria, for instance, it was evolving under the direct pressure of a foreign presence. And I like to comment someone Dr. Sami El-Arian most probably know well, and Ma'al Asaf, he is really dead, is Taraq al-Bishri. And Taraq al-Bishri, when he was mentioning this problematic of how do we evolve under foreign pressure, he said to me another main sentence, which sounds very important to me. He said, Francois, when you resist, can you move forward? Meaning, when you are under pressure, you cannot accommodate what someone wants to impose upon you. At a time when there is no pressure, there is a chance that you will import, accept, create this transformation. And in Yemen, it is very important to understand that political reform was not imposed neither by foreigners, nor by secularists, nor by Ilmaniyin. It was the first political reform, 1948, comes from where? Not from France, not from the hardliner secularist. It comes from Hassan al-Banna. In 1948, Fudail al-Wartilani, his name was mentioned this morning, is an Algerian nationalist sent by Hassan al-Banna, and he will try to put the first limits to the autocratic rule of Imam Yahya Hamid al-Din. He is the first one who will try to impose rules. They are written in Al-Mithaq al-Muqaddas, in the sacred charter, and it comes from inside the Islamic thinking. Immediately allow me to say that the modernization coming by the Ikhwan al-Muslimin will also have a specificity. It will move beyond sectarian divide. It will move, it will be capable of ignoring or lowering the importance of the sectarian divide. Why? Because those who will accept the influence, the modernizing influence sent by Fudail al-Wartilani, they could be considered as Zaydiyin, as Shia, at least some of them, not all of them, and they nevertheless accepted to communicate with a source which could be labeled as Sunni. And I think that this is very important. It will be a main characteristic of al-Islah. When Islah is created, reputedly it belongs to the tier of Ikhwan al-Muslimin. Nevertheless, the founder, Sheikh Abdullah Hussein al-Ahmar, is not a Sunni. So we represent nowadays Yemen as being divided by a sectarian war, by a war which is sectarian to a certain extent, but it's not certainly the root cause of the divide. But Yemen in the 1990 was a pioneer in this most important historical path of moving beyond the sectarian divide. And I think this is one of the major characteristic, I would say, of the action of Islah. Islah, of course, will go further, but is no longer alone. In 1990, I was at that time concentrating upon the crisis in Algeria, the civil war in Algeria, the violent repression of the Islamic movement by the Algerian militaries. At that time, Yemen was offering to the world a totally different experience. It was a pioneer in the participation of an Islamic movement to parliament and then to government. And this, at this level, early 90s, no question, well, 1989 in Jordan, but Yemen clearly offers a pioneer attitude when it comes to participating to parliament and participating to government. Of course, it has been said, and this is not, I'm not the one to underline this, but the specificity of this participation is the triple nature of the legitimacy of Sheikh Hussein al-Ahmar. He is a tribal leader. He is the head of the Islah, يعني من تيار إخوان المسلمين party, but he will not be the head of parliament unless with the support of the voices of the Congress, of the party of the president. So this triple legitimacy is really specific, and it's one of the main specificity I've been addressing. Let me go back. How many minutes do I have, Dr. Sami? Dr. Sami, can you hear me? Translation?
We hear you very well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you tell me how many minutes?
نعم أنت الآن تحدثت
You spoke for 14 minutes. You still have 6 minutes.
Okay.
To go.
No, I want to go back to the issue of religious legitimacy, which is very original. There is an oversimplification in the Western world, at least, and among the علمانيين المتشددين في العالم العربي, that there is a full opposition between the Islamic thought and the process of democratization. So al-Islah is the unique demonstration that it is not the case, that if there is no alien pressure upon it, the Islamic movement can be the one who will move forward the process of institutional transformation. But there is also very strange remark that we can do on Yemen. When probably many of you remember that when Imam Yahya Hamid al-Din, then when Imam Ahmad was faced with Al-Ahrar, the free Yemeni movement, what did he say to discredit them? He said, oh, they want to shorten, they want to cut the Quran al-Karim. They want to make shorter the Quran al-Karim. And they were banned by the society. Muslim brothers, the religious people, the religious reformists were rejected by the society because they were not religious enough. Because they were trying to move, to reform the society, they were rejected as not being religious enough. In 1962, the same process occurs when the revolution, which has been more or less imposed by the Egyptians, or at least initiated by the Egyptians, tend to fail. Az-Zubayri realizes that the tribes have rejected the revolution because, you know, the story, many of the tribesmen, they thought that Demokratia was the name of one of Gamal Abdel Nasser's wife. There was a total refusal. It was not considered as being part of the intuitive culture. What will Zubayri do? How will Zubayri save the Yemeni revolution? He goes in the mountains riding a monkey, and all of a sudden he says, oh, I have an idea. I shall create Hezbollah. I shall create Hezbollah. Who will refuse Hezbollah? So it is very interesting to realize that twice in history of Yemen, a religious movement such as the one who created Al-Islah was considered not religious enough, was considered contradicting the atmosphere of religion, and had to reconnect using tricks to have the wide range of population, not the reformist only, communicate. The reformists communicate with the entire range of the society. Okay, I would have much more to say. It has been said, of course, that after 2011, a lot of changes have occurred. I don't know, maybe if I missed one compartment of the discussion this morning, but it has to be said that the situation, to underline the paradox of the situation of Islah in the frame of the alliance with the Emirati and the Saudis, it is that, of course, the Emiratis have an obsessional opposition to this trend, which nevertheless is their main ally in Yemen. And the Emiratis, when they want to recruit, they say that they reject political Islam, but they cannot recruit except Salafi militias. And so this is also an angle of the specificity of the situation that Islah has been facing. I think that I must stop, because on this issue, I could speak for many days. I thank you very much for your attention. Ashkur el-Jamiya.
شكرا جزيلا لك فرانسوا.
Thank you so much, Francois. Francois talked in his presentation about some points which we may consider as peculiarities and specificities in the experience of Islam and the issue of Islam or religion versus politics. And he said that mentioning Islam in the constitution was essential, but it was the other way round in Yemen, as he mentioned at the time of Qahtan, actually the constitution was considered within Islam, and that was quite different, and that the climate in the north and the south was different. And he also mentioned the factor of the English presence and the demographic dimensions in Aden, and also the factors imposed by colonization, and how Islah became the most important movement that is concerned about the public will and other issues. And he talked about political reform in the presence of secular powers and colonial powers. And he said that this group or movement was able to spread and reach power. And this is a peculiarity or specificity that stands out in the Arab world. Despite its persistence for 25 years, it was quite early in comparison to other Arab countries, and it was able to overcome sectarian division and closer to the spirit of the modern world and age, and that al-Islah was enshrined in the consciousness of the Muslim community, although the founder was not himself a Sunni, and that's important. And he also mentioned that in his experience in Yemen in the 90s, after the painful and bloody experience in Algeria, that it was different in the 90s in Yemen, that there was a government, elections, and political practice, full-fledged political practice. And finally, he mentioned what he called the religious legitimacy, and that this is oversimplified in the West and misunderstood in the West, while in reality, this is a movement that needs to be studied and analyzed, because it started to engage in this experience quite early by religious people, not only people who are just mere regular laymen or Muslims. And at the end, he said he asked a question: how can those who played a great role in the Arab Spring and in 2011 end up being allies with the fiercest authoritarian regimes in the area, who are the spearhead of the counter-revolution movement? So this is a paradox that he pointed out as a question, basically. We now move to our next speaker. The second intervention is by Dr. Shakib Saleh about democracy and the prerequisites of change within the structure of an Islah party. Thank you so much, Mr. Sami, and thanks SIGA, the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, for this study, which is to study the social movements and affiliated Islamic parties and the changes in the structure of Islah, which I believe is a title that should have been made broader by calling it the prerequisites of change in the structure of al-Islah. And in my presentation, I will present those prerequisites in addition to the prerequisites of change in Yemen and the consideration of social movements and the social phenomena in Yemen. And we are talking here about modern Yemen after the 90s or after 1990. Yemen has an open gallery and a rich environment. It is a tribal, traditional, but and it's one of its problem is the ideological background of its politicians. I will skip all introductions. The key words are democracy, shura, tribalism, third world, and state. There is no disagreement, there is no convergence on the definition of the Yemeni character, but their understanding of their surrounding, that they serve their surrounding. There are no studies of the character of the Yemeni people, so it is important to study this Yemeni element. The Yemeni people study principles but not their surroundings. They understand the past but not the present. This is the ambiguity in which the complexity of the Yemeni character is, or to which the complexity of the Yemeni character is reduced. For example, death is a very natural thing, a normal thing for Yemenis. The last thing they would consider is life. We need assistance, but we are too proud to ask, and we have a legacy of poverty, and the memory is completely divorced from reality, and there is an aura of beauty and civilization, but on the ground there is nothing. The principles are and the values are very sublime, but in reality you find very little, and very poor conditions and deformed reality. Those are the most important aspects of the character of Yemeni people, and from this perspective we can see that we are close to the composition of East African people. For example, in Taz, there is no electricity and no water, but they will pray for Muslims in Kashmir and elsewhere while they are bombarded by the Houthis. So before talking about the structure of this party, we have to talk about its emergence geopolitically and its environment, i.e. the political environment or the political geography that led into its emergence. It came to existence in the 90s. It's the first Islamic party, earlier even than Sudan and Turkey, and it started its first electoral participation in 1993. It had its democratic practices in partnership with Saleh, the leader and president of Yemen at the time, and Islah also participated in social reform through syndicates and unions, journalism, etc. Al-Islah is affiliated with, or is an offshoot of, the Muslim Brotherhood. Most of the members are religious because of the da'wah aspect of this party and the fact that it's based on the idea of the Muslim family and Muslim society. You would not find members who are female members who do not wear hijab or who smoke. But before talking about democracy and the controversy that goes with it, let's go across the environment from which Al-Islah emanated and what factors played into its establishment. We leave the word for Abdullah Al-Ahmar, the founder of Al-Islah, when he said that the President Saleh asked me to formulate a party while we were still with the conference or the Congress, and he told us we should make a party with the Congress and that he would not part with us and we will be in the same block. In addition, he said that the agreement between me and the Socialist Party is that they represent the people in the south and I represent the National Congress in the north, and we have common agreements from which we cannot evade, and we, with the establishment of your party, we will build a bloc and you will oppose some of the points that you have agreed on with we have agreed on with the Socialist Party, and we will support you in this. Based on that, Saleh said he used Al-Islah as a card to eliminate his rivals in the south, which means that the environment from which Al-Islah emanated was one of conflict in the first place. In other, also, it was functional It had no philosophers or theoreticians, and it created a practical project with many preachers. And this is something that the Russian ambassador in Yemen mentioned in 1965. He said, we were wrong. Yemen was a small, underdeveloped community, but we were embarking on building an ideology there. We find that this goes across Yemen, from the leftist or the socialist ideology in the south to the religious ideology in the north. So to understand this positioning in the third world and the use of shura, because they thought that democratic practice was far from the people of this region. As for the person or the individual, they needed to be, their capacity needed to be built, and they needed to learn how to work with one another. So we would notice then in Al-Islah, you would find that people are classified. This is a Sufi, this is a Salafi, this is a Nasserite, this is a pro-National Congress, etc. This disagreement created a fragile structure. The changes within Al-Islah, the most important was the issue of the South and the Houthis. And I will here talk about two positions: their position towards the Houthis and to their position towards the issue of the South. Al-Islah was clear in its position from the war of 1994 in terms of reparation and asking for justice, and it was an advanced position. But the most important change and transformation in the position of Al-Islah, although it supported this war, it helped with its reparation. The other example is their position from Al-Houthi, because they agreed that or they did not agree that the army would crush the Houthis, but decided that we should hold dialogue with the Houthis. But Ali Abdullah Saleh waged the war anyway on the Houthis between 2004 to 2009. And those are the most important positions and variables of the Al-Islah party. It was advanced at the time in comparison to other political parties. There is another variable that is quite unclear within Al-Islah and its internal structure, which is the change from a group to a party. And this is something that Mr. Ahmed Shalafi mentioned later, but it is due to the close affinity and relations to the tribe and to the tribal structure and the structure of the interests of the individuals within society. So they had to take into consideration shura within their communities. So hence Al-Islah would not accept the discussion of the issues of women unless in the context of religion. They wouldn't accept a woman engaged in arts or dance, etc. And they created a field, and this is the third level of transformations of the positioning of Al-Islah with its rivals or adversaries. It held close relations with the Nasrites, and this is unmatched in any other Arab or Islamic country where an Islamic movement would create rapprochement with its adversaries. There are a few questions about Al-Islah, the overlap between the party and the political practice, the overlap between religion and politics and or dawah as well. The dawah, as they said, was part of the Muslim character, Muslim family, and Muslim society, and that's why those individuals would look at the many principles as beyond any shred of doubt or any discussion, and they would always look at some of those principles as beyond negotiating. The relation with the other was imposed by the social media recently, because Arab citizens have been deformed or misrepresented, and this is something that has been reflected in Al Jazeera by one of the anchors who said, where did they come from? He was told that those are people who gathered because of social media, because of Facebook, and they were raised away from policy and political parties. There was also the phenomenon of atheism and secularism, which started to spread in the among the ranks of the youth, and the political parties were blamed for this. And to go to the same point, which is the reproduction of adversaries in the 90s, the rivals were the socialists. In the next 10 years, they were the Nasrites, and the following, they were the Houthis. And if al-Islah, after a decade, survives, they would have a new adversary, most likely. And finally, the prerequisites of the party under the state and the domination, in the lack of a state and the domination of the Houthis, and the close up of the Quranic schools and the regular schools and religious schools, which is the policy of the Houthis, who came to Sana'a in a mission to do this. So prerequisites for change for the Al-Islah party have to be more daring, which is to give up the religious thought altogether and reproduce itself anew away from their religious identity, which requires a new strata of young people who would engage in modern culture, dance, arts, etc. And that's green. And that's clear, because if I have a sheikh, we will have only 20 people attending. If I have a dancer, I will have 5,000 in the ranks of Al-Islah. This transformation is also close to the change we witnessed in 2000 with the close of the schools in 2000. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shakib. He talked about the prerequisites of change, or the required change in the structure of Al-Islah. He posed more questions than answers, and I believe that was a deliberate strategy, because to open the floor for more discussion, he talked. Can you get closer to the microphone, Dr. Sam? He talked about democracy versus shura, and he said that this experience was early in and pioneer in using tools. And he said that they changed from a group to a political party. And he also talked about the changes related to their position of women, as women are dealt with from a religious point of view only. And he said that they created adversaries, but there are true problems in the overlap between religion and politics within the ranks of Al-Islah. And then he talked about the spread of atheism and secularism in the ranks of young people, which is a new phenomenon in the. And he said that there are new requirements that need to be honored. He concluded by a question of whether Al-Islah will be able to give up its religious standing and engage in politics purely. Now, the next speaker is Yusra Al-Hammadi, who's going to talk about young people, which answers the last question in your presentation. So maybe we will find the answer in with Dr. Yusra Al-Hammadi now. Peace be upon you all. First of all, I would like to thank SIGA, the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, in Sabah ad-Din Zaim University in Istanbul, and their partners in this symposium. And I would like also to thank the distinguished guests and reiterate what my colleague mentioned earlier in saluting the elite that is in attendance, and I would like to thank all attendees and listeners. First of all, I believe that this is such a good opportunity for us to talk or discuss the experience of Al-Islah Party, particularly when we present the issue of the position of Al-Islah towards young people in politics and positions. And if I am allowed, if I may, I want also to touch on the position of women. First of all, Al-Islah is considered an extension of the reformist movement in Yemen, which dates back to the 3rd Hijri century, which has produced pioneers of reformists in intellectual and thought terms such as Sana'ani and others whose intellectual discretion extended beyond the Yemeni borders to Afghanistan and Pakistan and elsewhere. This reformist school also produced the student movement in the 60s of last century, which affected the quality, a transformation from moving to from an emirate to or an imam-based governance system to a republic. The party in its structure reflects its representation of the young people through a department or a section for young people and students, and through by polling members of the party and outside the party, I was able to come up with certain outcomes. So to be fair, I will present those findings in relation to the role of young people in Al-Islah. In terms of the impact of the youth in political life, the young people at the beginning used to play an important role as imam. The imama refused education before, but the rich families and who are close to power refused this and insisted on spreading schools and knowledge, and they established a school in Taiz and Sana'a, and this important educational phase had a role in establishing a generation of revolutionaries who started to raise awareness in rural areas and rural households, and the laborers in textile industry as well as in the hospitality industry. And in the student protests that took place, there were some visions about young people, and they would say that they wanted us to quit fasting and praying, and others said that they wanted to exclude us from knowledge, as knowledge or education was restricted only to the rulers. Even The radio existed in the life in the house of one person who was one of the leaders. People did not even knew it existed. So this student mobilization or movement created a quality and a quantum leap because of their aspirations to democracy and participation in political life and political maturity. After years, we had a revolution in Yemen where we had a student protest. Although they were faced with many rumors, they persisted, and 5 years later, the precursors of a new era started to emerge. After that, we had the spread of education and dissemination of knowledge, and they worked on mainly the improvement of the educational process without engaging in politics. They called for the reform of governance, but they engaged mainly in education. But in 2011, the student movement had a great role in the revolution, and for the first time in the history of the country, we had student protests that openly asked for the toppling of the regime. When the protests started, they started peaceful and with little demands, but students only engaged and participated in the confrontation after 2014. And after the revolution of September, if we were talking about education in Yemen, it was seen as a tool, but in 2011, the student movement played a key role, and the political parties allied with those who advocated the same values. However, young people were aware of the magnitude of this era. In terms of young people and their political participation within the ranks of Al-Islah, it is no secret that the relation between young people and political parties in many countries is described as tense, and there is usually a large gap between young people and political parties, and the bulk of young people do not care about political parties, while political parties try to co-opt those young people. And on the contrary, I believe I have noticed a harmony and a mutual trust between the young people of Al-Islah and their leaders, and I attribute this to the current, future, and past political challenges that face this party and the faith of young people in the leadership of the party. This, of course, affects decision-making within and outside the party and created a mediation institution between the party and the young community.
We can't say that there is no objection or comments or suggestions towards the policy of Al-Islah through the survey or opinion polls, or through surveys or opinion polls. I found that the party looks at these the comments and objections as a healthy phenomenon that shows the ability of those people to strengthen the experience of the party. In this field, they are well aware that this national project, everyone around Al-Islah are gathered, and the justifications that are provided are linked between the are linked with the results and the outputs of the Al-Islah party. Of course, as we see in the Maslow pyramid of priorities, we see that safety is on top of the needs of people. Most of the leadership are males in Al-Islah. Globally, when it is seen that the space for men is larger than the women, and that the people between 23 and 44 years old are 57 of the population in the world, and whereas the young people who are less than 40 years old, they are only 9% of the world, and there are no parliamentarians less than 30 years of age in the world, and usually the young people play a very important role, but they are less active in the voting and electoral activities for several reasons. Most importantly, that they are in a period that they want to get political experience through reading and learning. From these comments, a lot of international organizations wanted to train the young people to become political leaders in the future and to provide training, providing training programs for them. Of course, the leaders of Al-Islah, there is only the first rank or the first level of the leaders who are still present. At the level of the secretariat, we see that we have young people, and at the level of localities, we can say that we have more than 70% of the members are young people. As for the leadership or the leading figures in the in Al-Islah party, we found that there are young people in the higher ranks of Al-Islah, including Mr. Yahya Al-Rawhani, the secretary in Al-Islah, and the head of the students department in the party, and Mr. Ali Jafari, and Mr. Ali Jarada, the head of the media, and there are a number of other leading figures from amongst the youth that represent 70% of the membership of the party. If we look at the participation outside the party, we have the head, the Minister of Youth and Sports, Mr. Naif Al-Bakri, and the Minister of Health, Qasim Al-Buhih. Here we can talk about the participation, the political participation of the youth of Al-Islah inside and outside the party. As for the importance or the interest of Al-Islah to the youth, it seems that in comparison with other groups, we find that Al-Islah is relying on the young to get or to move with the Al-Islah move forward. Because Al-Islah is a movement that is based on the activities, so it brings the young people to an independent department or an independent cycle there where they can practice or to be active. And this, the political program of Al-Islah shows the interest in this movement, although the activities of Al-Islah pays some interest to the young people, whether in institutes or in universities. And I believe one of the evidence on this interest, the first Congress of the Yemeni Students Union in the Republic of Yemen, I was present, and most of the representatives are people from Al-Islah, especially from the governorates, Shabwa, Al-Mukalla, Hadramaut. A lot of them were representative of Al-Islah, and there were some representatives of al-Islah from some governorates without the presence of any other party in this Congress or this conference. So al-Islah is always keen on qualifying and training the young people for leadership in the future. And there is a wide constituency for al-Islah, and I have seen that in the writings of a number of politicians or writers, and some people who newly joined al-Islah, they are keen on the participation. So this the young people are being led by young people in al-Islah. Most of the leadership in the party are from the students, and they are young people, and even those who were active in the revolution in the 1960s, they were young people, and those who were active in the revolution in February 2011, they were also young people, and those who continue the national struggle, most of them are young people. In the university, al-Islah states that it encourages the political participation of the syndicate members. The groups of students within al-Islah, when we used to go to the university in 2009, 2010, we found a lot of students who belong to al-Islah who will welcome us, and we were surprised why those young men and women are keen on welcoming us, and we found that they represent the union, and we found that some of them are from al-Islah, some of them are from the Congress, and some of them are from other parties. So they benefit from the academic and services provided, whether those who belong to al-Islah or from other groups from the political spectrum. Al-Islah, as I said, is interested in encouraging the young leadership, and most of the graduates, after they graduate from university or higher studies, they encourage them to do researches and to join research centers, especially in the past 3 years. A number of research centers or study centers that are present in Turkey or in other countries, we find a lot of young people working in these centers.
كلفة التجمع اليمني لإصلاح شباب وقادة على حد سواء. طبعا الإصلاح طبعا كلفة التجمع اليمني لإصلاح شباب وقادة الإصلاحيين بشكل عام.
Those who belong to al-Islah and the active people in the revolution
وهذا لاحظناه فعليا عندما كنا نشارك في المظاهرات السلمية.
We're active in the revolution, and this is something that we have noticed when we participated in the sit-ins and the civil disobedience and the revolution in 2011. The Islah people worked silently, and they didn't want to be under the spotlight, and they were providing services for the needs of the people in sit-ins. Al-Islah was facing a lot of challenges before and after. These challenges are represented in assassinations, arrests, and even in the jobs that are available in the government. It wouldn't be, no jobs will be given to people who belong to Al-Islah party. And of course, those who are in government, they don't get into the leading positions there. Al-Islah party always tells the young people to hold on to their legitimate rights. Until now, there are no extremists or terrorists amongst the Islah people, and they only use the peaceful means for the demands of the revolution since 2011 or after the coup of the Houthi movement, who don't want to have any dialogue or any discussion with other groups other than the language of weapons.
طبعا حزب الإصلاح نقول
We say that Al-Islah movement,
من خلال البحث ومن خلال الاطلاع على
through the research and learning the names of the people who are present in the higher ranks of Al-Islah,
كثيرا من شبابهم
there are
سواء في 2011 أو في بعد
there are a lot of young people after 2011 or 2014. Al-Islah, more than other groups, it is involved in the political scene. In the beginning of 2018, Al-Islah provided more than 12,000 martyrs. By that, and more than 20,000 wounded people from the leaders and members, in addition to thousands of families that are displaced. Even in the revolution of February, 80% of the revolution martyrs were from Al-Islah party. Some people say that the leadership of the Al-Islah are sending the young people to the death, but when we see or when we look to the realities on the ground, we see that people who belong to Al-Islah are being targeted, and some of the leaders are sacrificing their own sons and daughters because they are taking part into the building of their own homeland. Some of the reasons why the young people are not participating or engaged in politics, whether from Islah or others. First, because they don't have knowledge about the political parties and the services that that are provided in the community. There is an accumulative mobilization in the past 30 years through the regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh, which says that the parties are extremist or the fanatic, and so there is an accumulative mobilization under Saleh that partisanship is fanaticism, and the people didn't want to get involved with the parties. The Yemenis don't believe that they can impact the resolutions or the laws that impact their lives. Poverty and illiteracy play a major role in the lack of the participation of young people in politics because they can't afford the basic needs for themselves. There is a gap between the political knowledge and the political participation, and the weak role of media, social media or official traditional media for people to participate in democracy. And there is a lack of the culture of the young people to participate in politics, and there is a feeling of the lack of seriousness of any political reform and the feasibility of their participation. And that's something that we have seen in a lot of interviews with young people. The lack of the political education and the political background of people, and that made a lot of people don't want to get involved in politics, and the lack of institutes that can provide any education about democracy or politics. And the young people have concerns from being involved in any political or partisan activity in order not to be under security threat. When we ask the young people, they say that I don't want to get to be a partisan. So they have some political awareness, but they are afraid of being prosecuted. The lack of democratic education as well in Yemen. Thank you very much. That's about the youth. Do we have time for women? You can present a paper about women, and we will include it with the book that will be issued. Thank you very much, Ms. Yusra. She spoke elaborately about the role of the young people, and she has another participation about women, but we don't have time. Try to summarize at the end of the session about women if you want, in 2 minutes. But she will present the paper anyway, and we will include it in the paper. She talked about the role of the young people in Al-Islah, and she said that Al-Islah is a continuation of the reform movement in Yemen, which goes long in the history. And she spoke a lot about the participation of the young people in the political life, and that before the revolution that made Yemen a republic, is that the young people had an important role about raising awareness and transforming the society in terms of combating illiteracy. And she talked about the role of the young people, especially in the reforming political issues. She gave some statistics, but they are in contradict with what we have heard before. But she said that the leaders of about 80% or 78%, or that the leaders or that the people from the Al-Islah represent 70% of the leading figures here or there, and this is contradicting with another paper. So you have to talk with each other. Maybe the lady there said that a young man can be up to 60 years. So you even if I'm older than 60 years, but you're giving me hope now that I am still amongst the younger group. Well, this is very important, the youth, because in general they have the ability to of renewal and adding new visions. She talked about the participation of the youth in Al-Islah, and that Al-Islah relies on them in the important figures, and that they have an office for students or an office for the young people. In conclusion, that the party encourages the young people to participate in all aspects of life, and that they are not only the grassroots or the constituency of the party, but they are in the leading ranks of the party, and there are programs for qualifying and training them from within the party or from the society. The party always focuses on the peaceful means for the activities of the young people. These are very important points, and she talked about a lot of issues that might be obstacles in the face of the young people, like the democratic culture, the poor role of media, the lack of belief amongst the young people about the fairness of elections, and the engagement in politics. A lot of issues that she tried to measure academically, and their impact on the Yemeni society itself. Thank you very much. Now we move to the fourth movement, which the fourth paper by Mr. Ahmed Al-Shalafi, about the overlap between the group and the party in Al-Islah.
Good afternoon. Of course, I have listened in the first and second sessions to a number of papers that have been presented about Al-Islah Party, some of which were based on internal criticism, while others seemed to offer papers which were multifaceted and an in-depth consideration for the 30-year course or history of Al-Islah. The title of my intervention is The Islamic Phenomenon Between the Transformation from a Group to a Party. And the case study would be Al-Islah, because you cannot separate Al-Islah Party by only talking about its local Yemeni experience, and you cannot separate it from the Islamic movement's experience in general. As you know, they feed into one another. To talk.
لحظة واحدة، المترجم لا يسمع. هل أنت على القناة العربية؟
أنا والله أنا على القناة العادية.
أنا لا أسمع.
من الذي لا يسمع؟
الذي لا يسمع.
طيب اخرج يا أخي، اخرج. من القناة العربية وارجع لها مرة ثانية.
Can you exit the Arabic channel and come back, because we can hear you, but there is someone who can't hear. Can you go to the main channel and come back to the Arabic channel, and the audio would play. So what I was saying is that talking about Al-Islah Party, it is such a big party in Yemen, although there are nationalist parties, Ba'athist, Islamist, and of different backgrounds. But it's clear that over the past years, over almost the past 30 years, or since the start of the political life in Yemen, Islah has proven to be throughout these transformations from unity to the opposition to being engaged in the government to the other transition, which is Liqa al-Mushtarak, and then the 2011 revolution, the most important milestones. So this experience is quite rich, so it requires much criticism and evaluation. So this is what I tried to do in considering points I found in different studies, and on Google I found only a few results. As my colleagues in the previous session mentioned, there were only a few studies offered by the Islah Party itself, in addition to a few by Western think tanks. So the identity dilemma is not that of Al-Islah, but of all Islamic parties and movements that decided, particularly after 2011, to change from being movements to becoming parties, which made the change from religious to national, from theoretical to practical, from preaching to pragmatic. So I would be brief, and I personally believe that criticism of such a big party like Al-Islah requires an in-depth consideration and accuracy of the use of terms for the sake of research and analysis. So Al-Islah Party, the criticism of Al-Islah Party has many precautions, and although we consider Al-Islah as a political party, there is still an ambiguity about its leadership, its figures, and its structure, although it was declared as a political party in 2011. Also, we cannot separate it from Islamic movements in Yemen in general, which have become to existence over the past period, like An-Nahda in Tunisia, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and this affects its relations with Islamic movements, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood. And of course, there was this debate whether Al-Islah was part or an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. So no matter how much the Al-Islah had tried to deny their affiliation with the Muslim Brotherhood, it is of course an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood because of their hierarchy structure, their emergence in the 40s, and their ideological or intellectual resources. Its resources are not just Egyptian, but Egyptian, Syrian, and even from Pakistan and India, the Islamic movement there. In addition to the local resources, there are also some teachers and professors in universities in those countries that came back to Yemen with those ideas. So it is important to see the religious and political discourse within its context, although each of these movements has a different context, but all of those Islamic movements moved in the same on the same steps and the same track, and they stem from the same intellectual resource. They, despite the attempts to modernize, open up, and advance their discourse, they have the same resources. And all the while, there is a lot of contradiction or discrepancy between the discourse or the theory and the practice. Al-Islah, of course, is a model in terms of its advanced discourse in comparison to other Islamic movements. However, its tools and its theoretical and intellectual background is the same. But what differs between those parties in Egypt, Syria, Yemen, and elsewhere is their local context. The Al-Islah has started at the time of its foundation until the war of 1994. It was founded because of a number of conditions under the Provision 8 of the Yemeni constitution, which allows Yemenis to assemble as associations or parties or groups, and Al-Islah was founded, included many figures from across Yemen. Through those names that were diversified, Al-Islah was trying to introduce itself as a national party rather than a religious party that is in harmony with the unity in Yemen. So we're talking here about the vision. So this is a quite advanced vision. As for the practice, it was a different story. Although some of those names were considered figures for the Muslim Brotherhood, but there were also some intellectuals, businessmen, and community leaders, including Abdullah al-Ahmad, who was elected as the head of the higher committee of Al-Islah. And here I don't want to delve further into what is religious and what is tribal in Al-Islah. In Al-Islah, in its self-definition, it defines itself as an inclusive Yemeni Islamic movement that offers a vision for the modern Yemen, and they moved between, or they varied between, a revolution against the authoritarianism of power as the common denominator between all regimes that faced those parties, into also the recognition of peaceful power sharing and the establishment of Yemeni unity. So the revolution was no longer the appropriate discourse to use, particularly with its violence means, which was the main trait of the Islamic discourse for some time. The use of arms was in close affinity to the very character of those movements. But after the unity, Al-Islah found a chance to change, at least from the point of view of its leaders at the time. But in that time, between 90 and 94, they did not abandon the idea of the use of violence for a number of reasons. Since the beginning of its establishment as a public or a declared party until their alliance with Ali Abdullah Saleh against the separatist movements, and they justified this alliance by many issues, including the religious considerations. And then the second issue before we talk about the second phase, Al-Islah fell into the idea of being more a religious group than a party. Afterwards, they engaged in power in addition to the popular Congress, and they continued in the government until 1997, where they started to operate from the opposition and try to network with other parties, while Abdullah Saleh was trying to prepare his son Ahmad, and the alliances amongst political parties were emerging. Then comes the level or the time of al-Liqa al-Mushtarak. There were three milestones. It was an attempt by Al-Islah to move from a religious movement to, or a group to, political party. It was an important milestone, not only for Al-Islah, but for all Muslim or Islamic movements. Then we had the revolution of 2011 where Al-Islah Party effectively and actively participated with all its momentum and all its tools. And I disagree with many who say that they have led the revolution, etc. That's not something that I would like to discuss here, but they were greatly involved in and engaged in the revolution. I believe that the peaceful popular uprising or revolution in 2011 was one of the most important milestones for Al-Islah Party that could have transformed it into a ground-based or a grassroots-based and a civil party, and they could have called this the time of awakening or rising. Then they went through the alliance with the Arab coalition, which I call the relapse phase. The Al-Islah was working on persisting and standing fast in front of other alliances. So even in its weakness, it wanted to communicate with other parties, such as in 1992 with the Ba'ath Party, and then it started a governmental coalition with the Socialist Party, and it ended up with a political body in 2003, which is Al-Liqa al-Mushtarak, and this was very enriching for Al-Islah. And in 2007, Al-Islah declared its slogan for the next phase, which is the peaceful power sharing, and this was an important milestone for partisan and public and community-based work, and it could have advanced Al-Islah even closer to the idea of becoming a political party. But as I said, there were certain events that prevented the materialization of this hope, because all throughout those times there were some divisions within Islah between the Salafists, the civil and others, particularly after 2011 and afterwards. The presidential elections in 2006 were also an important milestone, because for the first time it engages in a direct political confrontation with the head of the regime. This was very important for the party, because it was able to use a peaceful confrontation methods or means in the face of the regime. They always said that their a candidate used to be Ali Abdullah Saleh, but they wanted to replace him by a consensual president, and they offered Ali Abdullah Saleh to leave power, but he wanted to leave it to his son and exploit the resources that should be taken by him and his family. After that, the next stage, as I said, was the popular uprising or revolution. According to many observers, they failed to deal with this phase, which is the post-2011 revolution period, as they took power while they didn't have the tools for governance, and when they dealt with the government, and when they were part to that government and participants or members of the parliament, be it the or any other governance means, they failed in using these governance means in 2011. But with the Arab Spring, Al-Islah started to use the opportunity to make certain achievements against the political authority, about the street or the public surpassed the political parties. And this is an existing debate, whether it was a political decision by the political parties or it was just a general mood among the public. But this is a question that applies to all Arab Spring countries, that those parties mostly engaged in those revolutions, not because they wanted to, but because it was the general mood of the public at the time. However, the public and the base surpassed the party, and the party found itself in 2011 facing a new reality that is not in line with the non-violence or peaceful means that it engaged, and it had to engage in the new context, not only because the political reality has changed, but also because it would take the burden of all the repercussions of the ongoing events because of being the largest political power and close to the government. So those parties thought that engaging in the state, and that is mainly due to lack of analysis and criticism tools and understanding politics, those parties came to power and opened their diaries, journals and papers, and they disregarding, for example, this terrorist designation against some of them. Al-Islah engaged in what it called the squares of change, using its tribal background in the surrounding of Sana'a. And they used this tribal belt outside Sana'a in confrontation of the regime and of the government. So until the revolution of the 26th of September, which they used to be rejected in tribal spheres, and Al-Sallal, the president Al-Sallal, is said to have said that when he was told that Yemen was recognized by the United States, he asked whether Arhab, a Yemeni tribe, has recognized the state. Ali Abdullah Saleh was forced to give up power to his deputy, and the party thought that trying to do community service would spoil its work, and the party was failed itself in combating corruption and managing the economy. But after an initial success in service provision, they also started to fall into traps in military and security terms. So like previous periods, they continued to think of themselves as a group, like the situation is in Egypt, and he thought that they would have an effect on the institution, but this requires the presence of the military and the police rather than to be in the context in Yemen, where there were many terrorist groups that were facilitated in the south, that were facilitated by the former regime, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and from where the counter-revolution came. Al-Islah continued to strive to be a reformist party. Until that point, Al-Islah was moving and between being a group and being a political party, and all of this prepared it for what came next. And then came the Arab Alliance and the fight with the Houthis. This is one of the most critical moments that made Al-Islah become a group again rather than a party. So hundreds of its leaders have moved to Saudi Arabia, and they have affected an alliance with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And because of this alliance, Al-Islah have changed a lot of its previous attempts to make advances, and to try in one way or another to return to its former identity or context, which is being a group rather than being a party. The conclusion I came up with here from all of those phases and historical milestones, in general, the ability of the party to move from a group into a party, there are a number of questions. The organization, its composition is twofold. First of all, there is the group, which is the backbone of the party, and that is ideologically affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are the leaders and organizers of most of its public events. The second part are the members and advocates and supporters of Al-Islah, including notables and tribal leaders. So, and if we ask those who are close to Al-Islah party, do you really know how Al-Islah party is run or governed? It's clear that the mentality of a secret group persists today. Of course, I should not disregard the features of modernization or advancement in discourse. Al-Islah today undoubtedly is better than 30 years ago when it was first established as a political party, and better than 50 years ago, and better than 20 years ago. It tried to get rid of its extremist symbols in terms of ideas and figures, but it is not much better or advanced in terms of implementation and practice. What you hear of when you hear religious debate, you find Al-Islah party and the figures of the religious leadership, they come forward or to the forefront, bringing back the question whether they are a religious group or a political party. Over the past 2 days, we had this debate, and those at the forefront of it were members or leaders even of the Al-Islah party. As I said, it is no better in terms of practice. As for many of its leaders up till now, particularly after they moved to Riyadh, as we said, and after we have this counter-revolution, many believe that the reasons are related to the structure of the party and its ideology. They think that the leadership and the group has to maintain itself and persist as such. And I said that this alliance with the UAE and Saudi Arabia is a relapse in the history of Al-Islah. But in comparison between Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the mother of the Muslim Brotherhood movement with Al-Islah or other Islamic movements elsewhere, we find that not only Islah but different Islamic groups are trapped in the past. Those parties that are engaged in politics are still engaging in religion, the use of religious tools. How long more do you need? How much more do I have? 2 minutes. Is that okay? Okay, I'll do my best. As I said, they are stuck in past frameworks, but to be realistic and fair, the lack of divorce with their past is because they are keen in being close to their community and the grassroots phase. So we have two breaks on this, the internal structure as well as the communal structure of Al-Islah that pulls it back to the past. Here comes the question, did they transform in the first place between the religious to the political, between the group to the political party? Well, there are a few questions that can be used to judge this. Women, it's just an open question. Of course, everybody in the first session, everybody mentioned Tawakkul Kariman, who was the only woman, and she's now resigned. She was made to resign. In terms of freedoms, intellectual freedoms, religious freedoms, and political freedoms, and women freedoms, Al-Islah and other Islamic movements fail to adopt those freedoms. In addition to questions of democracy, as Al-Islah and other Islamic movements engaged in democracy, in addition to the question of terrorism, of course. Part of this failure to adopt those ideas, as I mentioned, is related to the organizational structure and the cultural background of the party. Undoubtedly, as we mentioned before, the public uprising and its adoption by Al-Islah had its repercussions for Al-Islah. But basically, I am with the point of view that there were many chances and opportunities given to those Islamic movements, including Al-Islah, to transform themselves from a group to, or a movement to, a political party, but they could not because of the external factors that we mentioned, and not because of the war that took place in Yemen, but because they were unable to advance and progress within those parties. And this hope has been extinguished with the first counter-revolution process against the revolution, because the capacity of counter-revolution was much bigger and outran the capacity of Islamic movements, particularly with the threat of the designation of terrorism and lack of harmony and harmonization with the leftists and others who allied with Al-Islah and Islamic movements in general after the Arab Spring. Now, we may think that the future is unknown, although the developments that happened earlier may have given rise to good outcomes after this hard labor. And of course, for the time being, any advance or change in the organizational structure will not bear fruit, and unless there is a radical change. And I'm saying this because I am an observer, a close observer of the situation in Yemen and of Islamic movements in Yemen. The only hope is that in the future years, not those war years and what comes afterwards, that there would be some change in those parties. Can you give me 3 more minutes? No, please. You have already taken 28 minutes. Oh, okay. Then let me a final word.
Everything that happened makes a lot of people warn Al-Islah party from the demands inside and outside of a change, because it is unable to face any internal opposition, whether about it transformation, whether the transformation of the party or genuine changes in the internal structures and the inclusion of women and young people in the party. Just as happened, maybe that there will be internal opposition as what happened in the revolution in 2011, or after what happened in 2014 when the party lost a lot of its cadres, and there was doubt and uncertainty about, within the ranks of the party because of the differences. And that's what happened in Egypt, for example, with the Muslim Brotherhood, because of the different choices between the grassroots and the leadership. Maybe this is an opportunity for the Islamic movements in order to change their discourse internally and externally. Finally, what I would say that what we are presenting is not an analytical research or a research of the phenomenon and what is happening, because it requires a historic study. But there are the most important points that face the Islamic movement, which faced a lot of challenges to move from a group into a party, and with all of the problems that it faced in the past, because it was at a move, because the developments of the events and what happened was faster than their ability to change. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I took a lot of more than the time allocated for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. He spoke about the transformation from a group or a movement into a political party, and he said that Al-Islah Party is an old one in Yemen, and we find the same thing in the Arab world, that when a religious group that was living in an authoritarian environment, then it transforms or moves to become a political party in a society that it was known as a religious group. There are a lot of questions, for example, in the policy and the mechanisms of the group, and he asked about the problem.
على كل الأحوال المنبع الفكري والثقافي لهذه الحركات هو واحد.
And their relation with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he said that there is a gap between the practice and the theory. And then he talked about the phases of Al-Islah from the establishment in 54, and then when the Yemen became united, and then there was a transformation within the party, and that there is a vision. It was about the making the party into a national party rather than a religious party, even if it is based on the thought or the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. And then he said that it is a reformist Yemeni party against the authoritarian regime, but there was a line that was revolutionary, that was not very useful when it became a political party. And then there was another phase which when it was close to the authority after until the opposition from the inheritance. There was a phase that was very important and requires deeper study, and it reiterates what happened, which is the al-liqa al-mushtarak and the revolution in which the party was involved in that period a lot. And then the retreat from the revolution, or the relapse from the revolution. He said that in this period of the revolution in 2011, it was a very important time because at that time, the movement could have moved to become a good political party. And then he talked about the phase of a movement that works for freedoms and human rights, and at the time it could have become a political party. Then he talked about the elections of 2006, that it was a turning point in terms of the confrontation with the president, and then the public revolution in 2011 and getting back to the authority between 2011 and 2014, and that these movements or these periods trained the parties for the revolutionary work, which wasn't planned. And he said that the relapse of the revolution of these parties was a dangerous point, and he repeated that different times in his work. He said that this party, that it was interested in the services in order to be close to the people, and they ignored the military or security issues. And then he said that it seems that the Al-Islah is relapsing to become a group again rather than a political party, and they are making this alliance with Saudi Arabia and UAE, and this is a decline in the movement, which was imposed by the counter-terrorism, the counter-revolution movement. And it's not a political party when it is wavering under pressure, the demands that the people have. And then he said that the decisions are made in a secret way, similar to the secret groups or secret movements, not in a political party. Nobody knows how the decisions are made. But he said that or the question that is still present within the party itself is still there. And how the party is going to survive, but there is a problem in this trust and the relation between the party and or some of the leaders, and Saudi Arabia requires answers. And there is employment of religion or the religious discourse in politics, He also talked about the issue of the women, and he gave an example of Tawakkul Kurman when she left the party. The party couldn't accommodate her, and he talked about democracy, liberties, and the use of discourse of terrorism. And he said that these issues should be tackled from the point of view of modern state, and that there are some opportunities that were that presented themselves for the Islamic movements, but those Islamic movements, including the Islamic movements in Yemen, didn't have the ability to transform into a political party, and that this experience should be a lesson for Yemen. And I don't know whether this is because of the frozen thought of the party or the lack of the tools. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for interruption. And now we will move to the last lecture or intervention by Mr. Ali Al-Ahmadi, and it will be about Al-Islah and the political environment between agreement and disagreement. The floor is yours. Peace be upon you. Do you hear me well? In the name of God. First, I would like to thank SIGA in Sabah Din Zaim University for this invitation. Maybe we didn't have time enough ahead of this conference to prepare a well prepared paper, but participating with you is an honor for me, and I hope that my presentation will be useful, a useful addition to this issue. The experience of Al-Islah, an experience of 30 years since the establishment of the party, is required one of the richest and most important political experiences in the Yemeni context, or maybe in the Arab context as well. It is an experience that affected the policies of Al-Islah party and the political scene in or landscape in the Yemeni Republic. We can break down this experience into three phases to diagnose the nature of this experience in these 30 years. The first phase is the phase of establishment, which goes or tends from the 1993 to 1997. In this period, Al-Islah party turned from an umbrella for the Islamic current in general into a modern political party. Many people who were at the time of that experience know that a lot of Islamic movements were under this umbrella, and amongst the founders of the party there were some Salafists and some tribal leaders, because the call was made in a wide spectrum, and by time and through the years of unity, they started to participate in the elections, and the leadership of the party started to have the responsibility to promote democracy and the deliberation of authority, or the circulation of authority. And there were some currents or some movements that withdrew because they were not convinced with democracy and the participation of elections, etc. This period was the period that led Al-Islah to mature, and during which there was or it led to the change of the leadership of the party from the popularist nature into a more organized nature. There was also attention to the factors that will make the party one of the leading parties. And this is a success for Al-Islah, and so many cadres were trained, whether in media, journalism, and the different theoretical and scientific fields. There was presence of Al-Islah in different syndicates, whether in journalism, law, or other fields. The year 1997, which was the year where it disengaged from the Popular Congress Party, the second phase was the phase of opposition, the political opposition, from the year 1997 to the year 2011 until the Gulf crisis. This period witnessed so many incidents and events, including the alliance of Al-Tahaluf al-Mushtarak, or the Al-Liqa al-Mushtarak. We said that the disengagement from some Islamic currents that didn't accommodate or didn't understand the change that occurred in the first phase. In the second phase, the change or the difference that happened with the ruling party of the Popular Congress. The Popular Congress wanted to monopolize authority and to provide inheritance to the ruling figure in the country. One of the achievements, not only in Yemen, but in the Arab world, was bringing together different parties in the political spectrum, including Islamist, leftist, Shiite, and Sunnah, under one umbrella. So this great experience influenced the political track, and there was oppression, silencing people in this political arena, and in the different prerogatives in the country, whether the elections or the other political activities. It was clear that the ruling party had doubts about other parties and concerned about other parties. And I believe that period witnessed the poorest time of relations between the ruling party and the Al-Islah party until 2006, until there was coexistence and acceptance of the other. But there was there wasn't much of that understanding, and there was more and more of this oppression and silencing people until the situation got into the revolution 2011. So we can say that the revolution continued until or this opposition period continued until the revolution, and Al-Islah was one in the leading ranks of the revolution because it has a lot of popularity, readiness, so it was leading the revolution, and all of its activities were facing or opposing the regime in a peaceful way.
And at this stage, which featured meeting and converging with the various movements and currents, the National or Popular Congress, the opposition or the infiltration of the Popular Congress was too large that it prevented the solution to the crisis which led to the revolution. So people took to the streets and they continued without reaching solution internally within Yemen until we went into the last phase, which is the confrontation or the external intervention. The Yemenis were only able to get around this with Arab and international mediation, and for the first time there was a UN special envoy for Yemen. This was the third phase. So we can speak about two phases. The first and the second were ones in which Al-Islah had the initiative or the greatest role in making a difference and using internal factors. But in the third phase, the external intervention had the upper hand until we reached the coup of the Houthi coup in 2014, where we had the Iranian backing of the Houthis ideologically and by way of armament and political support offered by the Iranians. And later there was also an external intervention and factors of chaos that targeted al-Islah.
إذا تحدثنا عن هذه المراحل
We are to refer to those phases and the obligations and events that took place in those phases. We have to recognize that, particularly in the last phase, we have to recognize that what happened was because of a misjudgment, if I may say so, for the previous period. I believe that Al-Islah succeeded in changing from a group or a movement to a political party to a good extent. However, it was unable to accommodate for those who quit its ranks, including other Islamic movements. The other phase in which they disengaged from the Popular Congress movement, it had a terrible effect on what happened after the revolution. As for the third phase, with the external factor, it was very clear that the pioneers of the change and the parties of change in Yemen were totally unable to be the primary actors in Yemen. The Houthis and the national dialogue and the number of seats was not self-determined but dictated by external intervention. And then Al-Houthi took control of the training camps in Harran, and there was leniency with the Houthis and their control of Sana'a. All of these have given rise to the current situation as status quo, with all the discrepancies and disagreements. One of the strangest things is for Al-Islah to be the main ally in the war against the Houthi, and to have the sheikhs of Al-Islah as supported by the coalition, and to have Al-Islah the main target in liberated areas and media outside, supported by or backed by the coalition itself, targeting Al-Islah. It is this paradox that has, and this paradoxical relation that introduced the country into a very ambiguous and a precarious situation with no clear exit from this crisis. These three phases, our brothers in Al-Islah have to recognize that they had to pause, to evaluate those phases, and to make use of every criticism and every effort that is made in terms of workshops or studies such as this one, to reach an appropriate approach that is suitable with and that is appropriate to the change that has taken place. And the most important change that Yemen is witnessing right now is the change of and depreciation of the icons and pillars of the statehood in Yemen, including the economy, stability, and trust. This is not something that they can deal with in the same way they have dealt with in the first and second phases at the time of political stability or the democratic process. Yemen is standing now before and faces the risk of losing or being lost and wasted for years to come. This requires much in-depth analysis and contemplation to come up with visions and ideas to save and rescue the country. And one of the most important pillars in this reconsideration is al-Islah, which is considered the most important backbone in the restoration of the state and the restoration of the republic, in addition to the opposition and resistance of the Houthis. I have a few points to make briefly. Maybe I hope we have time to delve more in depth into some of those points to offer suitable vision. The first point is the closed organizational partisan structure. In the phase of stability and the phase of democratic practice, one of the most important features that are in favor of any party is to have a clear structure and a partisan structure that is quite rigorous in order to engage in the democratic process, or even to confront rulers in despotic or non-democratic states by having an idea upon which the members of the party agree. And undoubtedly, Ali Abdullah Saleh repeatedly tried to infiltrate al-Islah, as he did with other parties that he attracted some of their leaders and weakened their ranks, but al-Islah persisted despite those attempts and was able to reach to persistence and continuity as the strongest Yemeni party that continues to be coherent in its leadership and grassroots support or constituency, despite all the obstacles. This advantage of al-Islah may become a disadvantage given that this closed political or the closed partisan structure in a community that may be dismantled and is subject to a crude external intervention. This may isolate the party and put it away from the fast changes happening in the country, and it may be targeted because it is unable to integrate as much as it should with some national forces with whom a front or a common view and vision can be established for the reform and rescue of the state or of the country. We are seeing now a state with fragile institutions and a weak structure. So this closed partisan structure may be inappropriate for the current circumstances in which the country lives, and this partisan closeness also may push for some sort of exclusiveness, which may make some people act as though they are public servants and engage in corruption and give them a sense of impunity or immunity against accountability because of the support they enjoy from the party or the party's constituency. There is also another point, which is the centralization, the over-centralization that affects the presence of the party in the different parts of the country. The Yemeni Republic, the Republic of Yemen, is geographically diverse and unique, and also socially diverse, and it has many political experiences, most importantly the states of the north and the south, and most of its political life or experiences are quite modern, so we cannot just forget them or neglect them. You cannot neglect the fact that we had a socialist regime in the south, and that there was also an imama regime, a theological regime in the north before the revolution and the independence in the revolution in the north and the independence in the south. All of this cultural heritage and legacy cannot be disregarded in terms of its impact on the various parts of Yemen. That's why it is important to review this issue without looking at all geographical areas in a centralized manner. Centrality or centralization may be understood in the at the level of the state in terms of the republic, unity, and partisan plurality. Those principles that are indispensable are truly centralized and should be central and mainstreamed throughout the state, but there are certain social traits and subcultures and communities that have to be taken into consideration and understood well. And I believe that failure to understand the peculiarity of certain communities is what led to the antagonization of some of those communities and the formation of a public opinion against al-Islah, giving the chance for the anti-Islah media to market the hate speech and exclusion and elimination discourse. This is an issue that needs to be reviewed in order to understand the peculiarity and specificity of each community and to establish a form of flexibility in dealing with those various components in accordance with the principles of the Republic. The concluding remark, which is to engage young people in the cadres of the party. There is a paradox in Al-Islah party, which is that we have cadres that are active and good at different branches and areas you find in certain governorates. The members of the party are present in most charities or most organizations and most activities everywhere, but you find a scarcity in political cadres and leaders that may progress into the upper level of leadership in the party. This is a dilemma and a problem that may affect the progression of al-Islah, and it should be reconsidered, and focus should be made on building the capacity of the cadres and creating a national diversity within the party that would provide it with further strength and ability to persist and progress and advance in its current battle, which is the restoration of the state and the preservation of the republic, democracy, and freedom. These are the main points I wanted to make, and I hope we find more people who would echo those points or other points that may help come to an understanding of Al-Islah Party, which I personally, as well as many others, consider the backbone and the pillar, a main pillar in political work in Yemen, and one of the most important pillars in support of resistance, the resistance against the coup against the republic and the coup against partisan plurality. And Al-Islah, in its 30-year history, is also one of the most important factors in maintaining Yemeni unification or unity under the very many attempts to divide Yemen. In conclusion, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. He talked about agreement and disagreement or the factors that lead to that. And he said that maybe the experience of Al-Islah may be one of the most important ones, not only at the Yemeni level, but in the Arab scale. And he divided the phases into 3 phases. The first one was the establishment from 19 to 97. And he said that at this period, the party moved from an Islamic movement to a modern political party with ideals like democracy and practicing authority. And this movement of Al-Islah, they changed later from a popularist movement to a political one. And then he talked about the movement of the party from being in alliance with the authority to become in the opposition, the political opposition. He said that almost from 1997 until 2011, the events or the incidents of the Arab Revolution, the Arab Spring Revolutions, and that it brought the different parties from different political spectrum together. That's why it is an important experience. And this period continued until 2011. In the middle of this period, in 26, it was one of the most important, or what it was a turning point when the president was about to give inheritance of the power to his son. And then we moved to the third period from the Arab Spring until now, and he called it the period of external interference or the confrontation. He talked about the Gulf intervention and trying to foil the experience, and he talked about a military intervention which targeted the party most than others. And he said that the alliances were trying to put the party in the face of the Houthi, and it was targeted by those same groups. And he said that to analyze this period, it managed to move from a movement to a party, but it couldn't accommodate some of the figures, and but it managed to be present and to confront the Houthis. And Al-Islah became the first or number one target of the Houthis in areas where the Houthis are operating or not operating in them. And this if we understand that, maybe this will be important in order not to get to the catastrophic scenario, which he called the collapse of the state, and which is a threat to the political and democratic issue. And if that happens, it will mean that we will need years, or it will take years of loss and confusion. Then he talked towards the end of his remarks about a number of issues. He said that the party, if when it has a clear vision and a structure, it can be useful in some period, but it can be a negative, or it has disadvantages at some point. He said that the Al-Islah remained the largest one in its ideas and in its grassroots. This might be a strength, but it could turn into a weakness because the party could be out of the political arena, but it should have an umbrella for the to save the country. And he said that sometimes the party can give some advantages at the level, at the cost of national issues. He said that the party has, or Yemen has, a lot of diversity from the south to the north, and that it cannot address all areas with the same notion. And he reiterated the political pluralism, and this requires a study and in-depth analysis, and there should be a space for others. He also talked about that the networking of the grassroots with the leadership, and that there are some active people, but they are not present in the political positions to have the diversity that is required. He said that this period is the battle for democracy, and he said that the party is one of the most important periods. And now we finished these interventions. We still have a few points that we can have one or two interventions, and afterwards we will give each speaker a few minutes, 3 minutes, if they want to provide any comments on the comments that will be provided. Now we have from the room here, we have two people who want to intervene. My name is Al-Ghawri. I am living here in Turkey. I have a question to any speaker. It's not a problem. It is a general question, and even the answer can be in 1 or 2 minutes. The first question is, how do you evaluate the Al-Islah party during the war from 2011 until 2022? How did they manage the file of the war? Did they succeed or not? What are the main failures and the successes? So the second question about the future role of Al-Islah party after 2022. What will be the tendency of Al-Islah, and what role will it have in the future with the new presidential council? What is the role of Al-Islah, and what tendencies does it have to take? Muhammad Al-Qubati. I am a sociology student in Ibn Khaldun University. I have several points, but I will focus on 2 points. The first point is the duality of the group and the party. some of the papers were dealing with Al-Islah as a political party, but the organizational mechanism or the organizational structure is as a religious group, not as a political party. So when we speak about Al-Islah as a political party, we cannot talk about it only as a party. When we are talking about a party, we're talking about the peak of the iceberg, but at the top of the tip of the iceberg. But we are not talking about what is hidden under the water. Now I am in water since 2014. Now I can't, for example, know who is the head of the organizational office inside Turkey. I know him personally, but I can't say that this is a common knowledge for people. That, for example, if I want to have an interview with the organizational officer of Al-Islah party here in Turkey, you can go to this person or that person as of a piece of information that is well known. And when we are talking about the party, and we say that it started in 1990, not before that, then we start to face a problem in this issue. We can talk about, we can find a problem in the approach in dealing with the with Al-Islah party and the relation of this party with modernity or with the modern the modern reality, because the ideology or the organization of that group is an medieval structure, or at least a pre-modern era. And the political and the thought or the intellectual aspect of this group don't belong to this country. And when they wanted to come, for example, they depended on the Islamic culture, and they faced the nationalist problem, and they faced a problem with the issue of the homeland and the nation. Then they had a problem with the democracy and modernity. So how are they going to deal with the democracy afterwards, especially after the wave of the Arab Spring? They started to face a problem with the secularism. So there are problems. So the pre-modern ideology and of the Islamic groups, and with the modernity that we are getting in, creates some problems. And what makes the Al-Islah more successful than other groups is that Yemen didn't get into the problems or into the modernity like other countries. That's why they have they have a good, they were more successful. My question to Mr. Bourgois, that he said that there is a peculiarity or a specificity of the Yemen, but actually the idea of the Al-Islah was to restore the caliphate, but when they found that it is difficult to apply that in reality, the questions start to appear. Do we need to improve this idea or the ideals or the ideology of our group or not? And I believe that they are different from other groups in the Arab world because they can do that. Thank you very much. Your comment was very important, and I don't think that anybody mentioned that. We need to give you the microphone in order for others to listen.
أنا وصلني أنه سيتحدث عن المرأة، ثم ذكر لي هذا الصباح أنه لم يقل لأحد أن يتحدث عن المرأة، كان إشكالية. قد تكون الإشكالية حدثت إنه طبع.
Maybe the problem is that the issue of the women should have been addressed by one of the speakers, but he was told in the morning about that, but he couldn't do that. And it will be unjust to speak about women in 5 minutes. What we can do is that we can give 1 hour later in the future to speak about that, and the paper related to that can be included. This paper will be part of this, although that we don't cover it here. And in the 13 experiences, we didn't speak about women in specific in those 13 experiences. Which topic that you didn't hear about? We can't translate it. There is no
هذا
microphone.
عتب توجهيه هل هذا عتب توجهيه لنا؟
Is this a blame that you are addressing to us or to the speakers?
بس شوف عادي مش حاجة جامعة في تركيا لا اسمح.
يا أختي العزيزة أنا لست خبير في الشأن اليمني.
I'm not an expert on the Yemeni issue, and I am always keen about the participation of women, and I wish always to have, for example, in any event that we have here in the center, to have 50-50 participation of women. When you look at the present people, we look at 50-50. I'm not talking about Yemen here. Everything in all the Islamic movements, this is the problem. This is the 16th experience. We talked about Egypt, about Sudan, about Tunisia, Iran, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon. The participation of women is no more than 10%. And for 2 days, we don't have any women. So this is something that I cannot control. Why? Because it has to do with the expertise and the lack of knowledge. That's why when asked the speakers, we do our best, but we don't manage to do that most of the time. But I would say something. We don't mean in this study to tackle women in specific, because this is something that might be extended more. But when it was suggested, I encouraged that. But I didn't say that I want, for example, the experience of women in Egypt or in Sudan. It came part of the context, but there was no meaningful attempt to do that.
صحيح هذا قد يحتاج إلى أنا.
That's right. This might need.
أفضي لك سرا.
I will tell you a secret. We started here in 2017. This is the 5th year for me here. In 2018, I told the staff here to hold a conference for women. And I don't want to see any man. It is a sexist approach, and I didn't see any institution that can pay 1 lira for that. So there is a problem. I agree with you. Now we are really we're losing time. Just let me give the microphone. A question, then we will move to the speakers and we will conclude.
بس بحكم الحديث يعني عن تجمع اليمين الإصلاح.
Because we're talking about the group of the of al-Islah.
بحكم الحديث يعني عن تجمع اليمين الإصلاح.
The Yemeni group of Islah. I want to ask Dr. Yusra a question about women. How can the role of women be promoted within the party, because women are facing obstacles? What are the reasons of these obstacles within the party? By the way, those statistics that you have given us, how many of them are women and how many of them are men? As for the role of women in al-Islah, I didn't talk as someone who belongs from al-Islah. I'm just a speaker from within the party. So I believe the role of women in al-Islah is in law, education, and then the political issue. They are present a lot, but they're not focused on in the media. I believe they need to have more visibility. And the last time, for example, one of the leaders of Al-Islah, they got the award of Duriya Shafiq for peace and the human rights, but nobody talked about her and about that award. Miss Salam Al-Haj, for example, her voice was heard in Geneva in the United Nations, and she participated in communicating the injustices that that are caused by the war for the past years, and she is leading the association of the mothers of kidnapped people in Yemen. So women who belong to Al-Islah are present in charity, in politics, in human rights work, or providing assistance for the people, for the orphans or people with the destroyed houses, etc., etc. This is in terms of the human rights. As for the political and the human rights participation in the international arenas. As for her participation in the organizational structure of Al-Islah, the women are present in the Shura Council, which is the highest rank, and it is in the higher authority of Al-Islah, which is also one of the high ranks in the top of the pyramid or the structure, and they represent women. And the Department of Women, which is completely separate, and inside Islah, even within the literature or the bylaws of the party, it is written that women are the sisters of men. But the problem is not in the policy of the party, but it's rather in the nature, in the social or societal, tribal nature and religious nature of Yemen. Nevertheless, in the past years, especially after 2014, women who belong to Al-Islah are willing to participate in politics, and if there are parliamentary elections, there will be initiatives of Yemeni women to participate in local councils or in the parliament, and they are keen to participate, especially after they have seen the political experience in Tunisia. I recall that there was a visit to Kuwait and a visit from Algeria, Tunisia, and the Ummah Council from Kuwait, and they came to learn from the participation of women in Yemen from the different governances. So, although the participation or the history of our participation is not that long, but there is a wide participation of women, despite the illiteracy that we have in our society. This is one of the achievements of the party. As for positions that women want to occupy, of course, we have 14% of the seats for women within Al-Islah, but they want to get more seats in the leadership or in the grassroots. The seats participating in the leadership of Al-Islah. Of course, women want to have more seats, but the problem is in the breakdown of the political process. Al-Islah wanted to have the 5th public conference in 2015 because of the war. We couldn't do that. And the popular conference or the public conference of Al-Islah is the highest level of Al-Islah because of the breakdown of the political process. We don't have a progress or any progression with the work of Al-Islah. Of course, there are steps that need to be taken, but they are postponed because of the current situation. We hope that the conditions will be ripe to do that, and we hope that the current political process will help women. After the Arab Spring and the presence of Tawakkul Kerman, it showed that the presence of or the visibility of women was a positive point. I'm not talking about Al-Islah, I'm talking about Yemen in general. We need a microphone to translate.
يعني أنا كان عندي أكثر من تساؤل لكن الوقت ضيق يعني والحديث كان طويل يعني.
I had several questions, but we don't have time.
مدة طويلة مع علي عبد الله صالح.
We know that Al-Islah was an ally with Ali Abdullah Saleh, and Ali Abdullah Saleh signed the document of or the treaty, or it was a signatory to the treaty of eliminating all forms of discrimination against women, and the Yemen signed and ratified that agreement. But until now, I don't see from Al-Islah any comment on this issue. Al-Islah party, as the colleague said, that it came to a Muslim conservative society. For example, you can see women in the Socialist Party dress the same like those in Al-Islah. The only problem or the only difference is in the political proposals that we hear from here or that. And so we need to be inclusive to women, and it is a big loss to lose Tawakkul Kurmanov from the party. There are a lot of things that we can talk about. Maybe if you have a session specific for women, because this is the weakness of the Islamic movements, and Muslim or Islamic movements talk about marginalizing half of the population, and women are used only as a vote in elections. And she said that some people or some delegations from other countries came to learn from the women experience in Yemen, because we are working at the macro level and the micro level, but not that much in the macro level. So in the micro level, women are working in the Quran institutes and in other educational areas, and you can find a lot of activity for women that you will be astonished from that. What the charity that we are the charity that we have seen and the organized work of the party is really amazing. Not because we are part of it, but now when we talk about the politics, we need to have a more mature work and not to be limited to this point.
Just a moment. We started with the speakers and we are only left with 10 minutes and 3 speakers. My modest opinion is that don't wait for anyone to open the floor for you. Just go forward. Don't wait for men to open the door for you. That's your struggle. Are you done? Ma'am, please go ahead. Just in terms of the separation between the party and the Islamic movement or the Islamic group, of course, this is a question I have posed to some of the party leaders, because about the reasons why they have made that separation, and we have a few theories which may be said to be logical. First of all, the international world and the secular world uses this as a criteria. Any political entity that has a religious, particularly Islamic character, they would refrain from having relations with it, and they will be suspicious because of ISIS and other extremist groups. So they are keen on making that a transformation, and they still continue to attempt that, but they cannot separate themselves from the tribal and societal environment. So if we are to separate the Yemeni or divide the Yemeni community, most of them, we would find them as Islamic scholars and tribal leaders. Islah cannot separate itself or distance itself from those components. This transition has to be smooth rather than shocking. It may collapse if the transition is a traumatic and not gradual into the aspired level in which it is national and civil with no religious character or religious affiliation to a religious group. The other point in relation to the relation with Saudi Arabia, I think that has been answered. As for what Mr. Ahmed mentioned in his intervention in terms of the Saudi-Yemeni relations, Al-Islah is running from and to Saudi Arabia, and this has caused a division in the ranks of the grassroots and the young people. Of course, this is a question that comes to mind if we are to look at it objectively. If we look at the situation in Yemen in general, regardless of Islah in itself, Saudi Arabia is an extension of the geography of Yemen, historically, geographically, with the existing and persisting relations. The situation in Yemen cannot exclude or disregard Saudi Arabia in its dynamics. As for the division among the ranks of the young people themselves in their posts and in their publications, they call for the popular conference or congress of the ruling party to unify themselves, because at the end of the day it is considered a Republican and Unitarian party, and we are keen on having all parties join ranks in a single front to maintain the unity of the state. As for he talked about atheism and secularism. Mr. Father Sulaiman, I don't know if you're familiar with him, has done some statistics in the spread of atheism among Arab youth, and in those statistics he found that there are... Can you speak into the microphone, please? The least numbers were in Yemen because of the religious factor that persists in Yemeni circles. So atheism cannot be said to be a phenomenon or a widespread phenomenon among Yemeni youth. So it's not a phenomenon, but just some rare cases. As for Ta'az, he mentioned that Ta'az persisted or is steadfast in the face of the Houthis. As for partisan belonging or affiliation for Ta'az in the face of the Houthis, this is an indication of the level of awareness and consciousness in partisan plurality in Ta'az. So if we look at the founders of the Nasrite and socialist parties, the leaders of those parties are sometimes the people of Ta'az themselves. So they participate in all ranks, and they take the lead as well. And this is an indicator to their awareness of the importance of partisan plurality. Can you restrict yourself to 1 minute, please? Abdul Ghani Shamrani, PhD in economics. There are two remarks. The first regarding the women and the ideologies made by the West. If we look at their history, no woman has led the US throughout history, and the greatest and biggest corporations in the US, women are represented by only 5%. Leadership positions around the world, no more than 10%, but For us, they want 50% for women, and women are not even content with that. And it is hard for women in Yemen to be general managers and to work 24 hours. Why don't the West themselves establish the 50%? Why do they want to impose a quota system? Why do they want to impose women with force? They say they want competition. They don't want competition. They only want to manipulate us and manipulate our regime. As for Tawakkol Kerman, she ran in the face of and contravened the party very clearly. The party allied with Saudi Arabia and the Arab coalition against the Houthis, but she was a full force before and after the disagreement with Qatar, attacking Saudi Arabia and foolishly, actually, rather than logically. In actuality, she was supposed to be part of the ranks of Al-Islah, and they would say that the Saudis would say that this woman is speaking against us and is damaging our reputation, and she's amongst your ranks, and you should dismiss her for her to speak on her own. And the freedom of opinion is not guaranteed, no?
ايوه يعني ممكن انت توقيفها من مجلس الشورى ولكن تخرجها من الحزب كله.
You can dismiss her from the Shura Council, but to dismiss her from the party altogether?
المرأة اليمنية انتزعت حقها.
لو سمحتوا بس الآن أنا لحظة دكتور خير هو عنده وجهة نظره من حقه.
He has a point of view, as he's entitled his point of view. We have to listen to all points of view. I am a bit embarrassed when people mention specific names because they can't respond personally. So I responded on her behalf, and she's a friend in anyways. Can you speak into the microphone, please? In Sudan, there is the largest level of participation of women in politics. So Yemeni women are present elsewhere. In Ethiopia, she is the head of the state, and in Tanzania as well. In Singapore, a migrated Yemeni woman has taken power. So migrated women, yourself and others, or in the expatriate, can take their rights without begging from anyone. Can you speak into the microphone? The interpreter can't hear without the microphone, please.
ايوه هذه معركة اجتماعية تخوضيها في بلادك.
This is a social battle that you should lead in your country, persist for tens of years, etc. But let me here take a point of order to manage time here. We started at the end and then gave the opportunity for the audience. I don't want to oppress points of view, but who wants to speak in 1 minute? 5 people only, 1 minute each, no further. We start with Dr. Mustafa and go clockwise, and then followed by 4 minutes by Dr. Ahmed and 4 minutes for Mr. Ali, and that's it. We have, in 1 minute, 2 points. In relation to the traditions, they are not fixed. When we talk about them as fixed traditions, we have to remember that there was a woman who was the queen of Yemen, and we no longer accept that. So first. Second, in terms of the Islamic movement attitude towards modernism, the mechanism adopted for Islamic movements is that they address this question only too late. The question with relation to democracy and the methods of governance only started 70 years ago. Now they find it the absolute, the most important solution in the face of authoritarianism. Maybe 50 years from now, they would acknowledge that secularism was the answer. I just wanted to mention one point. The time that Yemen prospered was under Queen Bilqis and Arwa bint al-Surayqi. Afterwards, it went into conflict. And also we had the German model. Merkel took Germany from a lower level to an upper level.
حول العالم القياديات يعني المرأة.
Look at all indicators in Germany. Many women, just like those, if given the opportunity, will achieve better than men. In Yemen, although there are rules or laws put and introduced by men, and there are a number of variables, but the intellectual background and mindset of men does not change. We are going to compete, but as the doctor mentioned, it takes things out of course, such as the defamation and tainting the reputation of women who are trying to get involved. The interpreter can't hear the speaker unless he uses the microphone.
فتح لحظة واحدة بس، لحظة واحدة. الآن الدور عند من؟
Whose turn is it? The Yemeni women now hold higher degrees and education and have other qualifications that supersede and overrun those of men, sorry. The role of Yemeni women, the elections showed that the educated, illiterate, rural Yemeni women participated in the elections and in the voting process, so they showed a high level of awareness within and without the Islah party. So women have proven that they are capable at the same level or even better than the men to deliver in their political performance, and they speak for themselves or for their communities, and they express themselves better than men do. And I also believe that there is a lack of experience in politics in general, be it amongst women or men. So why can't women learn just like men are given the opportunity to learn and be educated? So women and certain places want or need that experience, and they would refrain from participation for lack of capacity building and lack of experience. So they needed training and practice and pushing her to participate in order to prove herself. I can't hear the speaker.
صوتك لم يخرج انك معكيش ميكروفون. انت عايزه تسمع الناس ولا عايزه تسمع بس اللي هنا فقط؟
Do you want only those who are here to hear you, or do you want everybody to hear you because you're not using microphone? No, there are thousands who are hearing us because this video is going to be watched and heard by many. So this, what you said, cannot be heard because you haven't spoken into the microphone. Maybe men are concerned because women are in control inside their homes anyway, so they will be in control outside as well. First of all, women have a prominent role in Yemen, and they are not absent anywhere in Yemen. The other point is that Al-Islah Party is the party that most encouraged women to be engaged, to be educated, and to work in different fields. It did not belittle the role of women in any field, social, political, economic. It always encourages women, offers training courses we haven't learned and studied and we got training in except through the Al-Islah. The other parties such as the Nasrite, the Socialists, the Ba'athist, and other parties, even if they encourage women, they would have only one woman becoming prominent, but their grassroots would not involve any woman and they would have no role. But in Al-Islah, even if they are not prominent or well known, they are active and involved at all levels: political, economic, education, media, everywhere, and at all levels and fields. So it did not belittle that role at any level. The second point in terms of Tawakkul Karman, first of all, she was not dismissed because she was a woman or a female. She was dismissed by Islah Party because of a political era during which the Al-Islah was under external political pressure because of its contractual relation with Saudi Arabia. So whoever was in that, had been in that position, even if it were a man, they would have been dismissed. It wasn't because of her femininity or womanhood. So it was those statements that she made that were problematic, that caused her dismissal. So to say that it was because of her appearance or because of her womanhood, it was not the case. So we have people need to understand that this dismissal was not based on an accusation that she was she acted against Sharia or she was a woman, etc. That's, of course, in Yemen, society is conservative. It also maintains its customs and traditions quite strongly, but women are active, even sometimes more than European countries. European countries have taken and liberated women, but in a deformed way, in a way that it does not give her a real role in society. Their culture would be reduced only to singing, dancing, arts, etc. The role of women in Yemen, however, although they were conservative and wear hijab, are active and effective in all levels of life and fields, and this did not prevent her from getting to high levels of decision making, building society, and working hand in hand with shoulder to shoulder with men. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have two final remarks. After that, Mr. Ahmed and Mr. Ali, and then we conclude.
طيب طبعا أبدأ بالشكرين قبل الكلام قبل الانتهاء من الكلام لكم إتاحتكم لنا.
Before we end this, I thank you for the opportunity to give me the opportunity to speak, and I think what Dr. Shakib mentioned, saying that Al-Islah had no distinguished cadres as academics or others, although
لكن فعلا التجمع يضم اليوم.
Actually, Al-Islah includes a large audience or a large group of members involving military, medical staff, physicians, engineers, and academics. And multidisciplinary, really, and from all walks of life. The second point I wanted to make that Yusra mentioned, but just to reiterate this, the head of Mr. Muhammad al-Raidouni, the head of Al-Islah, mentioned that the Yemeni Islah Consortium is a political party that seeks to reform disturbances and imbalances in all fields of life through introducing Islam as the source of legislation and its adoption and obligation, a commitment to existing laws and the role of government. Thank you so much. The last intervention. Actually, there is a remark on the first intervention when we talk about Al-Islah after 2014 or starting in 2015 is problematic, because if we are not dealing with it as a party like it was in the past, but there is much ambiguity about it in this case. So when we talk about the future of the party at the time being, we may think that it is lucky and fortunate for the party that the war persists, because it would collapse otherwise. To go back to the point of Ms. Yusra, the idea of abiding by the predominant culture for women, she's talking as though Al-Islah was not active in creating this culture religiously and culturally and socially. Al-Islah is an active participant in the making of this culture. So unless their discourse is radically changed, they will continue to be participants and partners into the making of this culture. So the positions of women here, I was surprised, because I would think that they would feel to be oppressed within this society, but I, a man, seem to be more feminist than yourselves, and I believe that you are more oppressed than you believe. I believe that women are created and formed and formulated in the vision of men and from a male perspective. And when we talk about a quota system, we need a quota system because women contribute to the making of societies. In the Scandinavian countries, we have a Minister of Interior or a Minister of Defense, while for us, we only had the Minister of Human Rights, and she faced many challenges because of being a woman. So this gender equality between men and women is extremely important. Thank you so much for all of your comments. This is a controversial issue, even in the West itself, let alone being a controversial issue for us. And it requires a lot of scrutinization and research into the heritage and to look into what is beneficial to our societies and what is an external intervention. So both men and women, I believe, have to look into this question quite in depth. And at the end of the day, I believe that this is one other level of the struggle. We have the different classes, the vulnerable groups, the poor, and the oppressed, as well as women. And it's part of the struggle. And Islamic movements who uphold values and principles are worthier of doing justice to women, of course. There is a book in 5 volumes, actually, that talks about the rights of women in Islam, that many, Abdul Halim Abu Shukka is the author of that book. Many even Islamists are unaware of the details of those rights, and it is not based on analysis, but it's based on texts. At any rate, the patriarchal people it would not be to the liking of patriarchal people. Now, Ahmed al-Shalabi in 4 minutes, please go ahead. Yes. There's a point that was mentioned by almost all commentators when they talked about al-Islah being having the advantage that it maintained its coherence or cohesion throughout this time. We're not only talking about this last period after the war in 2014, but we're talking about cohesion throughout the different phases in the 90s, 2006, and then in 2011, and then in 2014. I believe that this is one of the disadvantages of this party and probably one of the disadvantages of many Islamic parties. I believe the disadvantageous thing is for the lively parties are those that are dynamic, that are mobile and changeable. So this over cohesion means that they are static. And this is one of the disadvantages of al-Islah, not only on the organizational structure level with no change in the organizational structure, but also in the intellectual background, including their view of women, of freedoms, of democracy, in addition to their dealing with many of the issues. So this cohesion is disadvantage rather than advantage, and it shares it with other Islamic movements that enjoy this that are so static. And this is not an advantage when there are too many variables. The fall of the regime, the alliance, external intervention, a war. This static nature is not an advantage in this case. I heard the female participants. The fact that the local community is conservative, and the fact that it abides by the religious practices, it is the role of parties, political parties, to progress and advance the communities it leads. So it does not pardon the party from improving this issue of women. Al-Islah, how it managed the war. We should not overstate its responsibility. It's one of the political components, but it is the most active political party, militarily and politically. Actually, the war was managed poorly by all political parties, and what we are suffering now in Yemen, including the persistence and external intervention for and affiliation for 7 years. When we say our relations to Saudi Arabia are a matter of destiny, we have to remember that Al-Islah does not represent all of Yemen, and it's only a party in Yemen. As for the future role, and it's clear that Yemen will not be well in the near future, even if we reach a political settlement. And as you have seen, the presidential council came according to military might. Hence, Al-Islah has been excluded clearly from the coming political composition. So Yemen is going to go through many problems, and Islah is going to be part of that failure until a new hope emerges for a true transformation. The last word is for Dr. Ali. Please go ahead. Thank you so much. Actually, I just wanted to comment on the colleague who mentioned the difference between the group or the movement and the party. Unfortunately, I'm unable to open my camera. please pardon me. The main issue is that there is a need to separate the party from the group. Is a need by the party itself. It's not a need by others, for others to request it or demand it. So all leftist groups and parties are basically groups, and they have the same organizational structures or organizational background, although their ideologies are leftists rather than Islamists, and no one asked them to become full-fledged parties and refrain from their ideological affiliation. So whenever this transformation is undertaken, this is undertaken for the interest of the party itself, like we have seen in Egypt and elsewhere, because this transformation gives the party the room to liberate itself from the restrictions of the group, etc., or the movement. So I wanted to reiterate this. It is an issue that with which only the party is concerned and should not be used to criticize al-Islah by others, as long as the party is abiding by the laws, the constitution, and the republic, and all the means agreed upon by the citizens of the state. Finally, I would like to thank you all for this opportunity. I would like to thank you, Dr. Sami, in particular, for your good summary of my intervention. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the speakers, the attendees and participants, and Dr. Francois, Dr. Saleh, and Dr. Ahmad Shalafi, Ali Al-Ahmadi, and Ms. Yusra Al-Hamadi, and all of those present with us today for your present attendance and interaction. Hence, we have come to the end of our study of the experience in Yemen, which constitutes only the beginning rather than an end, and we hope that it continues with further reviews and studies. We have finished the review of 16 experiences, and we will undertake further review and study of about 12 other experiences, and we will publish the book and follow this with a conference to summarize all of this to benefit from all those lessons learned. Thank you so much. See you then.